The autumn rain hammered against the windshield of the delivery van as it crawled through the winding roads of Beverly Hills. Inside, 28-year-old Maya Rodriguez gripped the steering wheel with white knuckles, squinting at the GPS screen that kept flickering in and out. The address glowed mockingly. 1247 Sunset Ridge Drive. She had 15 minutes to make this delivery before Mrs. Whitmore's patience ran thinner than it already was. Maya had been working at Petals and Promises for 3 years now, ever since she'd dropped out of her master's program in journalism. The dream of becoming an investigative reporter had dissolved like sugar in rain the moment her mother's medical bills started piling up. Now, instead of chasing stories, she chased addresses through LA's labyrinthine hills, delivering arrangements to people who spent more on flowers than she made in a month. The GPS blinked again. She glanced down at the crumpled order form on the passenger seat. 1 dozen white roses, premium arrangement. Delivery by 4 p.m. The name on the order read A. Whitmore, with a note that said, "Anniversary, do not be late." Thunder cracked overhead as Maya turned onto what she thought was Sunset Ridge Drive. The mansions here were hidden behind tall gates and manicured hedges, each one more imposing than the last. She slowed as she approached number 1247, though something felt off. The gate was different from what she remembered from her last delivery to the Whitmores. More ornate, with Arabic calligraphy woven into the ironwork. She checked the address again. 1247. This had to be it. Maya pulled up to the intercom and pressed the button, rain streaming down her face as she leaned out the window. Static crackled. Then a male voice with a distinct British accent answered. "Yes? Flower delivery for Mrs. Whitmore," Maya called out, raising her voice over the storm. There was a pause. 1 moment. The gate swung open silently, and Maya drove through, her unease growing with each meter. The driveway was longer than she remembered, lined with date palms instead of the oak trees she recalled from her previous visit. The mansion itself loomed ahead, a stunning blend of modern architecture and Middle Eastern design, completely different from the Whitmore's traditional colonial estate. This wasn't right. Maya parked near the entrance, her heart beginning to race. She grabbed the arrangement, a stunning cascade of white roses in a crystal vase, and hurried through the rain toward the massive wooden doors. Before she could knock, they opened, revealing a tall man in his late 30s wearing an impeccably tailored charcoal suit. "The flowers," Maya stammered, water dripping from her rain jacket. "For Mrs. Whitmore?" The man's expression was unreadable, his dark eyes studying her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. He had sharp features, olive skin, and an air of authority that seemed to fill the doorway. "There is no Mrs. Whitmore at this residence," he said, his accent placing him somewhere in the Gulf region, possibly Saudi Arabia or the UAE. Maya's stomach dropped. "Oh God, I'm so sorry. I must have the wrong address. The GPS, it's been acting up all day and—" "Wait." The man's voice cut through her rambling apology. He stepped forward, his eyes narrowing as he studied her face more closely. The rain continued to pour, but he seemed oblivious to it, completely focused on her. "What is your name?" "Maya. Maya Rodriguez." "Look, I'm really sorry about this mix-up. I'll just go and—" "Rodriguez." He repeated the name slowly, as if testing it. "And before that, your mother's maiden name." A chill ran down Maya's spine that had nothing to do with the cold rain. Why would you ask me that?" The man's expression shifted, something like recognition flickering across his features. "Come inside. Please, I really should go. I have the right address somewhere, and—" Maya, the way he said her name stopped her cold. There was something in his tone, a familiarity that made no sense. "You need to come inside, now." Against every instinct screaming at her to run, Maya found herself stepping through the doorway. The interior was breathtaking. Marble floors, soaring ceilings with intricate geometric patterns, and artwork that probably cost more than her entire apartment building. But what caught her attention was the way the man was looking at her, as if he'd seen a ghost. He gestured to a sitting room off the main foyer. "Please, sit down. I apologize for my abruptness. My name is Khalid Al-Rashid." The name meant nothing to Maya, but the way he carried himself suggested it should. She perched nervously on the edge of a cream-colored sofa, still clutching the vase of roses like a shield. Khalid sat across from her, his posture rigid, his eyes never leaving her face. "This is going to sound strange," he began, his voice carefully controlled. "But have you ever been to Dubai? Or Abu Dhabi?" "No, I've barely left California." "Mr. Al-Rashid, I really don't understand. What was your mother's maiden name?" he asked again, more urgently this time. Maya's defenses went up. "Why do you want to know?" "Because," Khalid said, leaning forward, "you look exactly like someone I knew. Someone who disappeared 29 years ago. The room seemed to tilt. What are you talking about? Khalid stood abruptly and walked to a bookshelf, pulling down a leather-bound photo album. He flipped through it quickly, then held out a photograph to Maya. This woman, do you recognize her? Maya took the photo with trembling hands. It showed a young woman, maybe early 20s, with olive skin and dark curly hair, standing on a beach somewhere tropical. She was laughing at the camera, her face full of joy and life. The resemblance was undeniable. The woman could have been Maya's twin, or more accurately, what Maya might look like in an old photograph. Who is this? Maya whispered. Her name was Layla Hassan. She worked as a translator for my father's company in Abu Dhabi. This photo was taken in 1996, just months before she vanished. Maya's mind raced. Her mother had always been vague about her past, deflecting questions about Maya's father, about where they'd lived before moving to Los Angeles when Maya was just a baby. There were no old photos, no mementos from before California. Her mother's maiden name was Hassan, but it was such a common Arabic name that Maya had never thought much of it. Layla Hassan disappeared from Dubai in November 1996, Khalid continued, his voice tight with emotion he was clearly trying to contain. She was 8 months pregnant. The police investigated but found nothing. It was as if she'd simply vanished into thin air. My mother's name is Elena Rodriguez, Maya said, but her voice lacked conviction. She married my father, Carlos Rodriguez, and did you know Carlos Rodriguez? Khalid interrupted gently. Did you ever meet him? The question hit like a physical blow. He died before I was born. My mother said he was killed in a car accident. Or perhaps Carlos Rodriguez never existed, Khalid said softly. Perhaps he was a name on false documents, a new identity for a woman running from something, or someone. Maya set the photo down with shaking hands. Why would she run? Why would someone need to disappear like that? Khalid's expression darkened. Because my father, Sheikh Omar Al-Rashid, was not a good man. He was powerful, wealthy, and he believed he owned everything and everyone around him. Layla worked closely with him, and I believe, he paused, seeming to struggle with what to say next. I believe he became obsessed with her. When she tried to leave, tried to end whatever inappropriate relationship he'd forced upon her, he threatened her, threatened to destroy her family back in Lebanon, to make sure she never worked again, to take away everything she had. The pieces were starting to fall into place, forming a picture Maya didn't want to see. You think she was pregnant with your father's child. I think she was pregnant with someone's child, and she was terrified enough to flee halfway around the world to protect that child from my father's reach. Khalid met her eyes directly. Maya, when is your birthday? July 15th. 1997. Khalid closed his eyes briefly. Layla disappeared on November 22nd, 1996. 8 months pregnant. If she had the baby around your birthday, he trailed off, the implication hanging heavy in the air. This is insane, Maya said, standing abruptly. You're telling me my entire life is a lie based on a photograph and some dates that happen to line up? My mother would have told me. Would she? Khalid challenged gently. If she'd spent 28 years building a new life, protecting you from a powerful man who might want to claim you as his heir or use you as leverage, would she risk that by telling you the truth? Maya's mind spun back through her childhood, all the odd moments that never quite made sense. Her mother's paranoia about privacy, the way she always paid in cash, avoided photographs, never went to the doctor unless absolutely necessary. The lack of any family history, any connection to a past before Los Angeles. The vague stories about Maya's father that never quite added up. Details that changed depending on when they were told. Before we go any further, Maya said, trying to regain some control over the situation, why do you even care? If your father was this terrible man, why does any of this matter to you? Khalid walked to the window, looking out at the rain-soaked estate. My father died 3 years ago, cancer. In his final days, he was consumed with finding Layla, finding the child he believed was his. He hired investigators, spent millions trying to track them down, but Layla had covered her tracks too well. She'd become someone else entirely. He turned back to face Maya. He left behind a fortune, an empire built on oil, real estate, and investments across the globe. But he also left behind a will with a very specific clause. If his child with Layla Hassan was ever found and verified through DNA testing, that child would inherit 50% of his estate. The other 50% was split between his legitimate children, myself, and my 2 sisters. The number hit Maya like a freight train. 50% of what exactly? The estate is currently valued at approximately $3.7 billion. The room spun. Maya sat down hard on the sofa, her legs suddenly unable to support her. Billion, with a B. Yes. Khalid sat down across from her again. Maya, I'm not telling you this to overwhelm you or to stake a claim on your life, but if what I suspect is true, if you are Layla's daughter, then you have a right to know who you are, who your family is, and yes, what you're entitled to. Why would you tell me this? Maya asked, her voice barely above a whisper. You'd be giving away half of your inheritance. For the first time since this surreal conversation began, Khalid smiled, though it was sad around the edges. Because my father's money is stained with the pain he caused people like Layla. Like your mother, if my suspicions are correct. I've spent the last 3 years trying to undo some of that damage, using his wealth for good instead of exploitation. If there's someone out there who deserves a share of that fortune more than I do, someone who suffered because of his actions, then they should have it. He leaned forward, his expression earnest. But more than that, Layla was kind to me when I was young. She was one of the few people in my father's orbit who treated me like a person, rather than an extension of his legacy. If she survived, if she managed to build a life and raise a daughter, then I want to help that daughter however I can. Not because of money, but because Layla deserved better than what my father put her through. Maya felt tears prickling at her eyes. I need to talk to my mother. Of course, Khalid said immediately. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card. My personal number is on here. Take whatever time you need. If you decide you want to pursue this, if you want answers, we can arrange for a DNA test. My father's DNA is on file with his estate lawyers for exactly this purpose. Maya took the card with numb fingers. The whole situation felt like something from a movie. Too bizarre to be real. An hour ago, she'd been worried about making a flower delivery on time. Now she was sitting in a mansion being told she might be the secret heir to $1 billion fortune. The flowers, she said absurdly, looking down at the vase of white roses still sitting on the coffee table between them. I still need to find the real 1247 Sunset Ridge. Khalid's expression softened. This is 1274 Sunset Ridge. You transposed the numbers. The Whitmore estate is 6 houses down. I'll have my driver take the flowers to them and explain the delay. You don't have to, please. It's the least I can do after turning your world upside down. He stood, offering his hand. Whatever you decide, Maya, know that you don't owe me anything. This isn't about obligation. It's about truth. Maya shook his hand, still feeling like she was moving through a dream. Khalid walked her to the door, where the rain had finally started to let up. As she stepped outside, he called after her. Maya, if your mother is Layla, tell her I'm glad she survived. Tell her Khalid remembers her kindness, and that I'm sorry for what my father put her through. The drive back to the flower shop passed in a blur. Maya's mind was racing too fast to focus on the road, on the other cars, on anything except the impossible story Khalid had told her. She thought about calling her mother immediately, but something held her back. This wasn't a conversation to have over the phone. By the time Maya pulled up to Petals and Promises, it was nearly 6 p.m. Mrs. Chen, the shop owner, was already locking up, her expression sour. The Whitmores called, she said sharply. The flowers were 2 hours late. That's coming out of your paycheck, Maya. I'm sorry, Maya trailed off. What could she possibly say? I'll make it up next week. Mrs. Chen shook her head, disappointment clear on her face. You're a good worker, but you're distracted lately. Always somewhere else in your head. Maybe you need to figure out what you really want to do with your life. The word stung, but Maya couldn't muster the energy to defend herself. She just nodded and headed to her car, Khalid's business card burning a hole in her pocket. The drive to her mother's small house in Glendale took 40 minutes in evening traffic. Maya's mother, Elena Rodriguez, lived in a modest one-story home with a small garden that she tended with obsessive care. She was 52 now, her once dark hair streaked with gray, her face lined with the kind of worry that came from decades of looking over your shoulder. Maya found her in the backyard, watering her roses in the fading light. Elena looked up at the sound of the gate, her smile automatic until she saw Maya's face. Mija, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost. Maya almost laughed at how accurate that statement was. Mom, we need to talk. Inside. Something in Maya's tone made Elena set down the watering can immediately. They moved into the small kitchen, where Elena made tea with shaking hands, clearly sensing this wasn't a normal visit. Tell me about my father, Maya said, once they were both seated at the worn kitchen table. Elena's cup rattled against the saucer. Maya, we've talked about this. Carlos died before you were born. There's nothing more to— Mom! Maya pulled out the photograph Khalid had given her, sliding it across the table. Tell me about Layla Hassan. The color drained from Elena's face. The cup slipped from her hand, shattering on the floor. Tea spread across the linoleum like blood, but Elena didn't move. couldn't seem to tear her eyes away from the photograph. "Where did you get this?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "I delivered flowers to the wrong house today, to 1274 Sunset Ridge Drive in Beverly Hills." Khalid Al-Rashid answered the door. Maya watched her mother's reaction carefully. He recognized me, or rather, he recognized Layla in my face. Elena's hands flew to her mouth, a sound like a wounded animal escaping her throat. Tears began streaming down her face. 28 years of secrets suddenly crashing down around her. "Mom," Maya said gently, reaching across the table to take her mother's hand. "Is it true? Is your real name Layla Hassan?" For a long moment, Elena, or Layla, just sobbed, her whole body shaking with the weight of the truth she'd carried for nearly 3 decades. Finally, she nodded. "I thought I'd hidden us well enough," she said through her tears. "I thought after all this time, we were safe, that he'd never find us." "Sheikh Omar is dead," Maya said softly. "He died 3 years ago. That's not who found us." Layla looked up sharply. "Dead?" "Yes. It was his son, Khalid. He's not like his father, Mom. He's not trying to hurt us." But Layla was shaking her head, pulling her hands away from Maya's. "You don't understand. Omar was a monster. Powerful, controlling, obsessed with owning everything he touched. I was just a translator, barely 24 years old, trying to support my family back in Lebanon. He became fixated on me, and when I tried to leave, tried to report his harassment to HR, he threatened everything. My family, my career, my life. Khalid told me," Maya said. "He thinks Omar was my biological father." Layla flinched as if struck. "When I found out I was pregnant, I knew I had to disappear. Omar would never let me raise his child in peace. He'd either take you from me or use you as another way to control me. So I ran. I used money I'd been secretly saving, got in touch with a woman who helped people disappear, created a new identity, Elena Rodriguez. I flew to Los Angeles and started over." "Why didn't you ever tell me?" Maya asked, hurt bleeding through her voice. "To protect you." Layla stood abruptly, pacing the small kitchen. "Every day you didn't know was a day you couldn't accidentally reveal something, couldn't go looking for answers that might lead him to us. I built this life, this quiet, invisible life, so that you could be safe, so that you could be free of that man's influence." Maya thought about the years her mother had worked 2 jobs, the way they'd always lived so carefully, so small, the way her mother had discouraged her from pursuing journalism, from any career that might put her in the public eye. It had all been about hiding, about staying invisible. "Khalid said there's a will," Maya said carefully, "that if I'm Omar's daughter and can prove it through DNA, I'd inherit 50% of the estate." Layla stopped pacing, turning to face her daughter with wide eyes. "How much?" "Billions, Mom. With a B." The silence that followed was deafening. Layla sank back into her chair, looking older than Maya had ever seen her. "I don't want his money," Layla said finally. "I don't want anything from him. I just wanted to be free." "But it's not his money anymore," Maya said gently. "It's an inheritance. And according to Khalid, it's mine by right. Money that could change our lives. Money that could pay off your medical bills, get you real health care, give us both the freedom to do more than just survive." "And what would we have to do to get it?" Layla asked bitterly. "Announce to the world who we are? Put ourselves in the spotlight? Expose everything I've spent 28 years hiding? We'd have to take a DNA test to prove I'm Omar's daughter. After that, I don't know the details. But Mom," Maya leaned forward, her voice earnest, "Omar is dead. He can't hurt us anymore. And the money, the estate, it's not about him. It's about what we could do with it, who we could help. You've spent your entire adult life running and hiding and sacrificing. Maybe it's time to stop running. Maybe it's time to claim what's rightfully ours and actually live." Layla studied her daughter's face, seeing not the scared child she'd been trying to protect, but a strong woman with her own agency, her own choices to make. "When did you get so wise?" she asked softly. "I learned from the strongest person I know," Maya replied. "My mother, whether her name is Elena Rodriguez or Layla Hassan." That night, Maya called Khalid. His voice was calm and professional as he outlined the process. A simple DNA test, submitted to a third-party lab used by the estate's lawyers, results in about 2 weeks. Everything would be handled discreetly, confidentially, until Maya decided what she wanted to do with the information. "There's something else you should know," Khalid said. "I have 2 sisters, Amira and Yasmin. They're aware of the clause in my father's will, and they're not happy about it. If the DNA test confirms what we suspect, there may be legal challenges. My father's estate is complicated, and not everyone in the family is as accepting of this situation as I am. Will they try to stop me from claiming the inheritance?" Maya asked. "They may try, but the will is ironclad, drawn up by the best lawyers in the world. If you're Omar's daughter, no amount of legal maneuvering will change that fact. I just wanted you to be prepared for potential conflict. Maya appreciated his honesty. Why are you really helping me, Khalid? You don't even know me. There was a long pause. Because I spent my whole life watching my father destroy people to get what he wanted. I saw what he did to people like your mother. People who were just trying to work, to survive, to live their lives. If I can help undo even a fraction of that damage, then maybe the Al-Rashid name can stand for something better than exploitation and cruelty. Maybe it can stand for justice. The DNA test was performed 3 days later in a discreet medical office in Century City, a simple cheek swab that would either confirm or destroy the theory that had upended Maya's life. Now all that was left to do was wait. The next 2 weeks were the longest of Maya's life. She continued working at the flower shop. But Mrs. Chen was right about one thing. She was distracted, always somewhere else in her head. She and her mother had long conversations every night, with Layla slowly revealing pieces of her past that she'd kept locked away for decades. She told Maya about growing up in Beirut during the Civil War, about losing her father to the violence and her mother to grief soon after, about coming to the Gulf states to find work, to build a better life, about meeting Omar Al-Rashid, who'd seemed charming at first, sophisticated and worldly, before revealing his true nature. He made me feel special, chosen, Layla said one night, her voice hollow with old pain. But it was never about me as a person. It was about possession, about having something rare and beautiful that he could control. When I told him I was pregnant, he immediately started making plans for how he would raise his heir, how he would mold our child into his image. He never asked what I wanted, never considered that I might have my own dreams for my baby's future. So you ran, Maya said. So I ran, and I'd do it again in a heartbeat, because it gave me you. It gave me these 28 years of watching you grow into an incredible woman, free from his influence. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon. Maya was arranging carnations when her phone rang. Khalid's number flashing on the screen. Her hands shook so badly she almost dropped the phone. The results are in, he said without preamble. Maya, there's a 99.97% probability that you are Sheikh Omar Al-Rashid's biological daughter. The flower shop seemed to tilt around her. Maya grabbed the counter for support, her vision swimming. Are you all right? Khalid's voice was concerned. Maya? I'm here, she managed. I don't know what I expected to feel. Relief? Anger? I just feel numb. That's understandable. This is a lot to process. But there's something else. Something the DNA test revealed that the lawyers want to discuss with you in person. What do you mean? Can you come to my house tomorrow? 10 a.m.? My lawyers will be there along with some other interested parties. It's important, Maya agreed, though trepidation crawled up her spine. The next morning, she and Layla drove together to Beverly Hills, turning onto Sunset Ridge Drive with a strange sense of déjà vu. This time, they entered through the gates of 1274 deliberately, knowing exactly where they were going. Khalid met them at the door, greeting Layla with unexpected gentleness. Ms. Hassan, or would you prefer Elena? Layla, she said softly. After all these years, I think it's time to reclaim my name. He led them to a formal dining room where several people were already gathered. A gray-haired man in an expensive suit introduced himself as Theodore Crane, the estate's primary attorney. Next to him sat 2 women who looked to be in their 30s, both beautiful and clearly Arab, their expressions ranging from curious to hostile. These are my sisters, Khalid said. Amira and Yasmin Al-Rashid. Amira, the older of the 2, stood to shake Maya's hand. Her grip was firm, her dark eyes assessing. So you're the secret daughter, the one who will take half our father's fortune. Amira, Khalid said warningly. It's fine, Maya said, meeting Amira's gaze steadily. I understand this is complicated for everyone. Complicated, Yasmin laughed, though there was no humor in it. That's one word for it. Our father spent millions looking for you, obsessed with finding his missing heir, and now you just show up, delivering flowers of all things. I didn't ask for any of this, Maya said quietly. I didn't even know Sheikh Omar existed until 2 weeks ago. That much is clear, Theodore interjected smoothly, opening a leather folder in front of him. The DNA results confirm beyond any doubt that Maya Rodriguez, born Layla Hassan's daughter, is Sheikh Omar's biological child, and therefore entitled to 50% of his estate, as outlined in his will. He paused, glancing around the table. However, there's a complication that wasn't anticipated when the will was drafted. What complication? Layla asked, her protective instincts immediately on alert. Theodore pulled out another document. The DNA test revealed something else. Maya's genetic markers show that she is not only Sheikh Omar's daughter, but also shares significant DNA with another person in our database. He looked directly at Khalid. According to the genetic analysis, Maya and Khalid are not half-siblings. They're full siblings. The room erupted. Amira and Yasmin both started talking at once, their voices raised in shock and anger. Layla's hand found Maya's, gripping it so tightly it hurt. But Maya's eyes were locked on Khalid, who had gone absolutely white. "That's impossible," he said, his voice barely audible. "My mother was Omar Al-Rashid. She died when I was 10. "Khalid," Theodore said gently, "I'm sorry, but the DNA doesn't lie. You and Maya share both biological parents, which means either you were also Layla Hassan's child or I'm not Amara's son," Khalid finished, the words seeming to cause him physical pain. Amira stood abruptly. "This is absurd. We all remember our mother. Khalid was her firstborn, her pride and joy." "I need to see the records," Khalid said, his voice hoarse. "Hospital records, birth certificates, everything." Theodore nodded. "We've already begun that process. But Khalid, there's strong evidence to suggest that you were born in November 1996. Not in August, as your official documents state. The discrepancy has always been there, but it was attributed to administrative errors in Abu Dhabi's record-keeping system at the time." Maya's mind was reeling. She looked at Khalid, really looked at him, and suddenly saw it. The same dark curly hair her mother had, the same shape of the eyes, the same olive complexion. They looked like siblings, because they were siblings. "Oh my God," Layla breathed, clearly coming to the same realization. "The month I disappeared. I was 8 months pregnant, but I was carrying twins." Everyone turned to stare at her. "Twins," she repeated, tears streaming down her face. "I'd had some complications early in the pregnancy, bleeding and pain. I went to the hospital, but Omar insisted it be kept private, that I see his personal physician rather than going to a regular hospital. The doctor did an ultrasound, but he said everything was fine, just one healthy baby." "But what if there were two?" Maya said slowly. "What if the doctor missed it? Or what if Omar knew and didn't tell you?" "My mother, Amara, couldn't have children," Khalid said, the words tumbling out as pieces clicked into place. "It was never discussed openly, but I remember fragments of arguments, my father's anger about it. She was his first wife, married to him for 3 years before I was supposedly born." Theodore was flipping through documents, his expression grave. "If Omar knew Layla was carrying twins, if he somehow arranged for one child to be taken at birth and given to Amara to raise as her own, he would have had to act before Layla was due to deliver," Khalid continued, his voice growing stronger as anger replaced shock. "He'd already been threatening her, controlling her. If he knew she was planning to run, he might have taken preemptive action." Layla's face had gone ashen. 3 weeks before I disappeared, I had an appointment with Omar's physician. He gave me something. Said it was vitamins for the baby. I felt strange afterward, dizzy and disconnected. I lost several hours, woke up in my apartment with no memory of how I got there. I thought I'd just been tired, that I'd fallen asleep in the doctor's office and they'd taken me home. The implication hung in the air, too horrible to speak aloud. Maya found her voice first. "You think they drugged you and performed a C-section, that they took one of the babies and let the other keep growing? It would explain so much," Theodore said grimly. "The complications Layla experienced, the scar tissue that would have been attributed to the pregnancy, the reason she went into labor early when she finally escaped." Khalid stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the marble floor. "My father stole my life. He stole me from my mother and gave me to Amara, let me grow up thinking I was something I wasn't. And then he let Layla run, knowing she was carrying my twin sister, knowing she'd spend the rest of her life in fear. We don't know for certain that's what happened," Yasmin said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Don't we?" Khalid turned on his sister, his composure finally cracking. "Everything we know about our father, every cruel and controlling thing he ever did, and you don't think he'd be capable of this?" Amira and Yasmin exchanged glances, and Maya could see the moment they stopped fighting the truth. Their father had been a monster, and this was exactly the kind of monstrous thing he would do. "There's a legal dimension to this," Theodore said, his lawyer's brain already working through the implications. "If Khalid and Maya are both Omar's children with Layla Hassan, then the 50% inheritance outlined in the will wouldn't apply the way we thought. The will specifically states, 'My child with Layla Hassan.' It doesn't account for multiple children." "What does that mean?" Maya asked. "It means the will is open to interpretation. A court could rule that the 50% should be split between you and Khalid, giving you each 25%. Or they could rule that the clause applies to both of you individually, meaning you'd each get 50%, which would leave nothing for Amira And Yasmin? That's not fair, Yasmin protested. We're his daughters too. Are you? Khalid asked coldly. Or are you Amara's daughters with someone else, just as I was Layla's son given to Amara? Do any of us actually know the truth about our parentage? The question silenced the room. Theodore cleared his throat.
I would recommend DNA testing for everyone present. Let's establish the actual family relationships before we proceed with any legal action. The meeting continued for another 2 hours. But Maya barely heard most of it. Her mind was stuck on one fact. She had a brother. Not just any brother, but a twin. Someone who'd been stolen from her mother, given to another woman to raise, all as part of a dead man's sick plan to control everyone around him.
When the meeting finally concluded, Maya found herself standing with Khalid on the mansion's terrace, looking out over the manicured grounds. The California sun was warm on her face, but she felt cold inside. I don't know what to say to you, Khalid said finally. We're strangers, but we're also family. The closest family either of us has, apparently. Maya turned to look at him, really seeing him for the first time as her brother rather than just some wealthy stranger who'd upended her life. Did you love her, Amara? Yes, Khalid said without hesitation. She raised me, cared for me, loved me as best she could, despite whatever circumstances brought me to her. If what we suspect is true, then she was as much a victim of my father's manipulation as your mother was. She couldn't have children, so he gave her one, gave her me. And let our real mother think you were dead, Maya added bitterly. Let her spend 28 years thinking she'd only had one baby, that she'd somehow lost or never had a second child. Layla appeared in the doorway, her eyes red from crying, but her spine straight with the strength that had allowed her to survive and rebuild. She walked over to Khalid, and for a moment just looked at him, her hand reaching up to touch his face. You have my mother's eyes, she said softly. My mother who died in Lebanon when I was 19. I never thought I'd see those eyes again. And here you are, my son, grown into a man I never got to know. Khalid's composure finally broke. He pulled Layla into an embrace, both of them crying for the years stolen from them, for the relationship they should have had but never could. Maya stood to the side, her own tears flowing freely. This was what Omar Al-Rashid had done. Not just stolen money or exerted power, but torn apart families, stolen childhoods, forced people to live lives that were never meant to be theirs. Over the following weeks, the DNA results confirmed what everyone had already come to accept. Khalid was indeed Layla's son, Maya's twin brother. Amira and Yasmin were Omar's daughters, but from a different mother entirely, a woman named Fatima, who'd been a household servant Omar had secretly been involved with. Amara, the woman who'd raised Khalid as her own, had genuinely been unable to have children, and had likely believed Khalid was adopted through official channels rather than stolen from a drugged and unconscious mother. The legal battles that followed were intense. Amira and Yasmin fought initially, hiring their own lawyers to contest the will's interpretation. But as more evidence came to light about Omar's crimes, about the systematic way he'd manipulated and destroyed lives, their fight lost steam. The court ruled that both Maya and Khalid were entitled to full shares under the will's clause, splitting the estate into 4 parts, 25% each to Maya and Khalid, and 25% to be split between Amira and Yasmin. It was a fortune beyond imagination, even divided. Maya and Khalid each inherited over $900 million, enough to change not just their lives, but the lives of everyone they touched. But the money, as staggering as it was, wasn't what mattered most to Maya, as she sat in a lawyer's office 6 months later, signing the final documents. What mattered was the family she'd gained. Khalid, who'd become not just a brother but a friend, someone who understood the strange circumstances of their shared birth in a way no one else could. Layla, who'd finally stopped running, who'd reclaimed her name and her history, and was seeing a therapist to work through decades of trauma. Even Amira and Yasmin had become, if not friends, then at least allies of a sort. They'd all been victims of Omar's machinations in different ways, and there was a strange bond in that shared damage. What will you do with it? Khalid asked Maya over coffee one afternoon. They'd taken to meeting weekly, slowly building the sibling relationship they'd been denied for 28 years. Maya thought about it. She'd already quit her job at the flower shop, much to Mrs. Chen's shock. She'd paid off her mother's medical bills, bought her a small house near the ocean where Layla had always dreamed of living. But there was so much more she wanted to do. I think I want to go back to journalism, Maya said. Investigative reporting, like I always dreamed of. But this time, I want to focus on stories like ours. People who've been exploited by the powerful, who've had their lives stolen or destroyed. I want to give them a voice. Khalid smiled. That's good. That's really good. I've been thinking about establishing a foundation. using my portion to help refugees and displaced people. People like our mother was when she first came to Dubai, looking for work. She'd like that, Maya said. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Two people who should have grown up together but were instead building a relationship as adults, stitching together a connection that had been torn apart before they'd even had a chance to know each other. Do you ever wonder what life would have been like, Khalid asked, if our father had been a different man? If we'd grown up together? Sometimes, Maya admitted. But then I think about who we became separately. You, trying to undo your father's damage. Me, growing up with a mother who taught me to value freedom and independence above everything else. Maybe we wouldn't have become these people if our circumstances had been different. Maybe, Khalid agreed. Or maybe we would have just found different paths to the same destination. I like to think that some things are inevitable, that who we are at our core would have come through regardless. Maya raised her coffee cup in a toast. To inevitable things then, and to making sure our father's legacy is one of justice rather than exploitation. Khalid clinked his cup against hers. To family, the one we were born into and the one we're choosing to build. 6 months turned into a year. Then, too, Maya launched her investigative journalism career, winning awards for her exposés on labor exploitation and human trafficking in the Gulf states. Her work was hard-hitting and personal, informed by her mother's experiences and the knowledge of what unchecked power could do to vulnerable people. Khalid's foundation became a major force in refugee assistance, providing not just money but resources, education, and advocacy. He split his time between Los Angeles and the Middle East, using his connections and his father's former business relationships to push for labor reforms and better treatment of migrant workers. Layla, free from fear for the first time in decades, began writing her memoir. It was a painful process, dredging up memories she'd spent years trying to forget, but also cathartic. She wanted people to understand what it was like to be powerless, to be at the mercy of someone who saw you as property rather than a person. One evening, 3 years after Maya had delivered flowers to the wrong mansion, the entire family gathered at Khalid's house for dinner. It had become a monthly tradition. Maya, Layla, Khalid, and sometimes even Amira and Yasmin, sharing a meal and slowly building something that resembled a functional family. As Maya looked around the table, she marveled at how much had changed. She'd gone from a struggling flower delivery girl to a successful journalist and philanthropist. She'd gained a brother, reclaimed her mother's true identity, and inherited a fortune. But more than that, she'd found her purpose. "I've been thinking," Maya said as dessert was being served, "about that day I delivered the flowers to the wrong address. How one small mistake, transposing 2 numbers, changed everything." "Fate," Layla said softly. "Or maybe just the universe's way of correcting an old wrong." "I prefer to think of it as opportunity meeting preparation," Khalid said. "You were already the person who would care about this story, who would want to use the inheritance for good. The wrong address just revealed the opportunity to do it on a larger scale." Maya smiled. "Whatever it was, I'm grateful, not for what Omar did, not for the pain and suffering, but for finding you, Khalid, for Mom getting to reclaim her life and her name, for all of us getting a chance to transform something evil into something that might actually help people." "Speaking of helping people," Khalid said, pulling out his phone, "I got an interesting call yesterday. There's a woman in Dubai, former domestic worker, who's trying to sue her employer for years of unpaid wages and abuse. The case is exactly the kind of thing both our organizations should be supporting. I thought maybe we could work on it together." Maya's journalist instincts immediately perked up. "Tell me everything." As Khalid laid out the details of the case, Layla watched her 2 children work together, planning and strategizing, using their resources and abilities to help someone who had no voice of their own. This was what she'd hoped for when she'd run all those years ago, that her child, or children as it turned out, would grow up to be good people, people who used whatever power they had to make the world better rather than worse. The scars of the past would never fully heal. There would always be a part of Khalid that mourned the mother he could have known, the childhood stolen from him. There would always be a part of Maya that grieved the brother she should have grown up with. And Layla would always carry the trauma of what Omar had done to her, the fear and violation and loss. But they were building something new from those scars, a family that chose each other every day, a legacy that helped instead of harmed, a future that honored the past's pain by working to ensure no one else had to suffer the same way. As the evening wound down and everyone prepared to leave, Maya paused at the door, looking back at the house where this had all begun, the mansion where she'd delivered flowers to the wrong address and discovered a family she never knew she had. "Thank you," she said to Khalid. "For what?" "For being the kind of man who would tell me the truth even when it cost you personally." "For being my brother," in every way that matters. Khalid pulled her into a hug. We're in this together now, always. Outside, the California evening was warm and clear, the sky painted in shades of orange and pink. Maya stood for a moment, breathing it in, thinking about the journey that had brought her here. From a struggling flower delivery girl who'd felt like her life was going nowhere, to a woman with purpose, family, and the resources to make a real difference. Sometimes the wrong address was exactly where you needed to go. Sometimes a mistake was actually destiny correcting itself. And sometimes the family you found was worth more than any fortune, even one worth billions. Maya walked to her car, her phone already ringing with a source for her next investigative piece. Behind her, Khalid's mansion glowed with warm light, a symbol of what they'd built together from the ashes of their father's cruelty. The florist had delivered flowers to the wrong mansion, and in doing so, had found exactly what she'd been missing all along: the truth about who she was, where she came from, and what she was meant to do with her life. And that, Maya thought as she drove away into the Los Angeles night, was worth more than all the roses in the world.